Rain hammered the cemetery gates as Damien Cross stepped out of his black car, his eyes already fixed on the one place he visited every year without fail. Tonight something was wrong. A figure knelt in front of his wife's headstone, shoulders shaking, hands pressed against the wet marble as if she could pull Claire back from the ground itself. Damien's guards froze at the sight, unsure whether to move forward or wait for his signal. No one came to this grave. No one even knew where it was, except for the handful of men who guarded his life every single day. He walked closer, his boots silent on the soaked grass, and the woman did not even notice him until his shadow fell across the stone. She looked up startled, her face streaked with tears and rain, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Her eyes were wide with fear, but there was something else in them too, something that looked almost like grief that matched his own. Damien's voice came out low and sharp. He asked her who she was and why she was crying over his wife's grave as if she had lost someone of her own. The young woman, who introduced herself only as Alina, tried to stand, but her legs seemed to give out beneath her. She whispered that she owed everything to the woman buried beneath that stone, and that she had searched for years just to find this place. Damien's jaw tightened. In 3 years, not a single soul had come here except him. He had built walls around this grave the same way he built walls around his empire, allowing no outsiders, no questions, no interruptions to his private mourning. Yet here was a stranger who spoke of his wife like she had known her intimately, like she carried a debt too heavy to explain in the rain. He demanded answers, his tone leaving no room for refusal, but Alina only shook her head and said it was not her place to tell him, not here, not like this. Thunder rolled overhead, and for a brief second Damien saw something in her eyes that reminded him painfully of Claire, a kind of quiet strength hiding beneath obvious fear. He reached out, not to grab her, but almost to steady her, and that single gesture seemed to frighten her more than his words had. Before his guards could react, Alina turned and ran through the rows of headstones, disappearing into the storm and the darkness beyond the cemetery gates, leaving nothing behind but wet footprints and 100 unanswered questions. Damien stood there long after she vanished, staring at his wife's name carved into the stone, his mind spinning with a single unbearable thought. Someone out there knew something about Claire that he did not. Someone had a secret tied to the woman he had loved and lost, and that secret had just slipped through his fingers into the storm. He turned to his men, his voice cold and final, and gave an order that would change everything. Find her. Whoever she was, wherever she had gone, he needed to know what Claire had hidden from him, and he was not going to rest until he did. It took 4 days for Damien's men to track Alina down. She was working a quiet job at a small bakery on the edge of the city, far from the world Damien ruled over. He walked in himself, dismissing his guards to the street outside, and found her behind the counter, flour on her hands and panic flooding her face the instant she saw him. She tried to slip toward the back door, but Damien's presence filled the small shop like a shadow blocking out the light. He told her gently, almost unlike himself, that he only wanted the truth, nothing more. Alina's hands trembled as she untied her apron, glancing at the few customers before leading him to a small storage room in the back. There, surrounded by sacks of flour and the sweet smell of baking bread, she finally spoke. She told him that years ago, before he ever knew her name, she had been trapped in a home filled with fear, with no way out and no one to turn to. Claire had found her somehow, through a charity event neither of them ever spoke about publicly, and had quietly arranged everything Alina needed to escape, using her own money and her own connections without telling a single soul, especially not her husband. Damien felt the ground shift beneath him. He had known his wife as elegant, composed, devoted to charity dinners and polite conversation, always careful never to embarrass him in front of other powerful families. He never imagined she had been living a second life entirely her own, one built on quiet courage instead of careful appearances. Alina continued, her voice breaking as she explained that Claire had checked on her every few months, always in secret, always without explanation, until the day Alina heard that Claire had died suddenly, and she had no way to reach the funeral without revealing herself. She had spent years trying to find where Claire was buried, afraid that showing up too soon might bring danger to herself or dishonor to the woman who saved her life. Only recently had she gathered the courage to visit, and she never expected the husband himself to appear that same night. Damien sat in silence for a long moment, processing a version of his wife he never knew existed, feeling a strange mixture of pride and grief tangled together in his chest. He asked Alina why she never came forward while Claire was alive, and she admitted that Claire had asked her not to, insisting it was safer for everyone if it remained a secret. Before Damien could ask anything else, Alina flinched at the sound of the front bell ringing, her whole body tensing as though the sound itself was a warning. She quickly composed herself and said it was probably nothing, just a regular customer, but Damien noticed her eyes darting toward the window with genuine fear. He realized then that whatever shadow Alina had escaped from years ago might not be entirely gone. As he studied her carefully, he understood this was no longer simply about uncovering his wife's hidden kindness. It was about protecting the one piece of Claire's legacy that still remained alive and breathing in front of him. Over the following weeks, Damien could not let go of the story Alina had shared. He returned to his private estate and began searching through Claire's old belongings, boxes he had never had the heart to open since her passing. Behind a locked drawer in her writing desk, he found a stack of ledgers filled with careful handwriting, listing names, dates, and small sums of money sent to different people across the city. Alina's name appeared several times, along with others Damien had never heard of, each entry a quiet record of someone Claire had helped without asking for recognition or thanks. Alongside the ledgers were letters, some finished and some left incomplete, revealing a woman who had spent years balancing two lives at once. In public, she smiled beside Damien at gatherings, always graceful, always composed. In private, she had been quietly building a network of support for people trapped in situations much like Alina's, using her position and her resources in ways Damien never imagined possible. Reading her words, Damien felt a heavy mix of admiration and guilt settle over him. He had been so consumed by protecting his empire that he never noticed the extraordinary compassion growing right beside him. Meanwhile, Alina's fear from the bakery had not been unfounded. The man who had once controlled her life, a man named Victor, had recently been released after years away, and he had begun asking questions around the old neighborhood, searching for any sign of where she had gone. Word traveled quickly in certain circles, and it did not take long for whispers of Alina's return to reach people who still remembered her from before. Alina tried to stay calm, telling herself that enough time had passed and that Victor had likely moved on with his life. But deep down she knew people like him rarely let go so easily. Damien arrived at the bakery again, this time with different news. He told Alina what he had discovered in Claire's letters, watching her expression shift from surprise to quiet tears as she realized just how much Claire had risked to help her and others like her. For the first time, Alina saw Damien not as a feared stranger, but as a grieving husband trying to understand a woman he had loved deeply, yet never fully known. In that shared vulnerability, something between them began to shift, not romantic, but rooted in mutual respect and a growing sense of shared purpose. It was during this visit that Alina finally admitted her fear about Victor, hesitant at first, worried that involving Damien might complicate his already dangerous world. But Damien's expression hardened with quiet determination. He told her plainly that Claire had chosen to protect her once, and he would not allow that protection to end simply because Claire was no longer there to give it. Alina studied him carefully, unsure whether to feel relieved or terrified of what his help might mean, but she nodded slowly, accepting an offer she knew she could not survive without. News of Damien's growing involvement with Alina spread quickly through his inner circle, drawing concern from the people closest to him. Marcus, his most trusted advisor, pulled him aside one evening, questioning why the powerful Damien Cross was suddenly dedicating time and resources to protect a woman with no connection to their world of business and alliances. Damien explained everything, from the grave to the ledgers to Claire's hidden compassion, watching Marcus's skepticism slowly soften into quiet understanding. Still, Marcus warned him that stirring up Victor's past could bring unwanted attention, especially if the man realized exactly who was now standing between him and Alina. Damien ignored the warning, driven by a sense of duty he could not fully explain even to himself. He arranged for a few trusted men to quietly watch over the bakery and Alina's apartment, ensuring she was never truly alone even when she believed herself to be. For a while, it seemed to work. Alina slowly regained her confidence, returning to a more normal rhythm of life, though she remained cautious, always checking over her shoulder out of old habit. Then one afternoon, Victor appeared outside the bakery, standing across the street, watching the building with unsettling patience. Alina spotted him through the window and froze, memories flooding back that she had spent years trying to bury. She quietly alerted one of Damien's men stationed nearby, who immediately contacted Damien himself. Within the hour, Damien arrived personally, calm on the surface but sharp with focus beneath it. He approached Victor directly, making it unmistakably clear that Alina was no longer someone he could threaten or control, and that any attempt to approach her again would have serious consequences for his freedom and his future. Victor, unaware he had wandered into the path of one of the most powerful men in the city, tried to argue his claim over Alina's past, insisting she belonged to his world and always would. Damien's response was measured but absolute, leaving no room for negotiation. He explained plainly that Alina now stood under protection that reached further than Victor could ever imagine, and that his continued presence in her life ended immediately, one way or another. Faced with the reality of who he was truly up against, Victor's confidence crumbled, and he backed away, disappearing from the street just as quickly as he had appeared. For the first time in years, Alina felt something she had almost forgotten was possible, a sense of real safety that did not depend on hiding or running. She thanked Damien quietly, unsure how to put into words what his protection meant to her. Damien, in turn, felt a strange sense of fulfillment he had not expected, as though standing up for Alina had allowed him to finally understand and honor a part of Claire he had only recently discovered. Their bond, born from grief and secrets, had grown into something steady and real, built not on obligation but on genuine care for one another's well-being. With Victor gone for good, Alina finally felt free to breathe without fear shadowing every step she took. She returned to the bakery with a lightness in her heart that had been missing for years, grateful beyond words for the chance Damien had given her to start over completely. One quiet afternoon, she invited him back to the small storage room where their first honest conversation had taken place, telling him there was one more thing he deserved to know, something she had kept hidden out of fear until now. She reached into an old bag she always carried and pulled out a sealed envelope, worn soft at the edges from being carried for so long. She explained that Claire had given it to her years ago, asking her to keep it safe and only deliver it to Damien if something ever happened to her. Alina admitted she had been too afraid to bring it forward sooner, worried it might cause him more pain than comfort, but she believed the time had finally come for him to have it. Damien took the envelope with trembling hands, recognizing his wife's familiar handwriting across the front. He opened it slowly, reading Claire's final words meant only for him. In the letter, she spoke of her quiet efforts to help people like Alina, explaining that she never told him because she feared it might complicate his responsibilities or put her efforts at risk. She wrote of her hope that one day, if he ever discovered this hidden part of her life, he would understand it came from love rather than secrecy for its own sake. She asked him gently to continue reaching out to others in need, to soften the hardened edges of his world, and to let compassion guide him the way it had guided her. Tears filled Damien's eyes as he finished reading, feeling as though Claire was speaking directly to him one final time. He looked up at Alina, understanding now that she was not simply a stranger who had wandered into his life, but a living piece of his wife's legacy, kept safe until she was ready to reveal herself completely. He made a quiet decision in that moment, one that would shape the rest of his life moving forward. He would honor Claire's wishes, not through grand gestures, but through steady, quiet actions that mirrored the compassion she had shown so many people in secret. In the months that followed, Damien expanded Claire's hidden efforts into something more structured, quietly funding safe housing and support for people escaping dangerous situations, always careful to keep his own name out of the spotlight, just as Claire had done before him. Alina became an important part of this new mission, working closely alongside him, no longer hiding from her past, but using it to help others find the same freedom she once found through Claire. What began as a single tearful encounter at a graveside had transformed into a lasting legacy, carrying Claire's spirit forward through the very people whose lives she had touched, and reminding Damien that even in loss, love could continue to grow in unexpected and powerful ways.